I figured she'd adjust eventually, Marley said, glancing over her shoulder as she rolled a large suitcase down the hallway. It thumped against the baseboard with each step, too loud for a house that was supposed to be quiet. I stood just inside the entryway, hand still on the door handle. I hadn't even taken my shoes off. My son Dean shifted beside me, avoiding my eyes. "It's just temporary, Mom," he said quickly. "Her mom lost her lease. We didn't want to drop this on you, but we didn't have anywhere else." Anywhere else? I looked past them. The guest room door was wide open. Inside, I caught sight of freshly fluffed pillows, pale floral ones I didn't recognize, stacked neatly on the bed I hadn't even finished unwrapping from the protective plastic. "I didn't want to drop it on me," I echoed quietly, stepping farther inside. Boxes still sat unopened in the living room. My armchair was in the wrong corner, waiting for the light to hit just right through the east-facing window, if they'd left it where I meant it to be. The scent of fresh paint clung to the walls, still settling. "You said you wanted company, remember?" Marley added a smile in her voice, though not on her face. "This way we can help each other and she won't be a bother. I promise." Lenor's very adaptable. My name wasn't on any part of this conversation. Not as a question, not even as a courtesy. Just a formality they'd chosen to skip. I watched Dean carry a duffel into the guest room, stepping over the rug I hadn't even vacuumed yet. Marley followed with a box labeled bathroom. Mom, I still hadn't finished moving in, but somehow they already had. I walked into the kitchen and set my keys down. The countertop was cool beneath my fingers. I reached for the coffee pot, empty just like yesterday. Just like every morning since I arrived, I turned back toward the hallway and saw the light on in the guest room. The door was already shut. I brewed the coffee out of habit. Same as always, 2 scoops, a pinch of cinnamon, French roast. The scent filled the kitchen, warm and familiar, but I never poured a cup. The machine beeped when it finished, but by then I was already somewhere else in my head. From where I stood, I could hear Marley's voice drifting from the guest room. She'll want to keep her things neat, so I'm moving the heavier coats to the hall closet. Coats, plural. Dean's footsteps passed behind me, heading toward the front door. I turned just in time to see him unlock the trunk of his car and lift out another suitcase. I didn't say anything. "Of course, we'd tell you if it were permanent," Marley said cheerfully, reappearing with a wire basket full of toiletries I didn't recognize. She placed it on the bathroom counter like it belonged there. I nodded slowly, my eyes fixed on the fridge. I opened it out of instinct. The shelves were already rearranged. My coffee creamer was tucked into the door bin. In its place, oat milk, beet juice, 2 containers of plant-based yogurt, and something in a mason jar labeled chia pudding. I closed the fridge and stared at the stainless steel surface. My reflection looked older than it had last week. My sweater sleeves hung loose around my wrists, my mouth drawn tight. Dean walked past me again, this time without a word, phone in hand. Marley called after him, asking if he'd remembered the olive oil she liked. I went to my bedroom and sat at the edge of the bed. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out a yellow legal pad, the same kind I'd used during budget meetings and staff evaluations for years. The lines were crisp, clean, waiting. At the top, I wrote things they didn't ask. Underneath, locks, deed, call Gloria. I put the pen down and pressed the pad closed. Somewhere down the hall, I heard laughter. Marley's mother had arrived. 3 jobs, 1 funeral, no help. After Wallace died, I didn't have time to fall apart. Grief became something I folded between shifts. 2 hours of sleep here, grading papers there, a night shift, watching security cameras just to keep the lights on. Dean was 17, too old to cry, too young to understand what it meant when the mortgage notice came in red ink. I didn't tell him I sold my mother's wedding ring for his spring tuition. He didn't know I skipped meals the year he studied abroad. When the tuition office threatened to drop him for late payment, I wired money from a retirement account I hadn't even finished opening. The day he got his diploma, he cried, held me like he remembered. Maybe he did, but memory is short when comfort settles in. Years later, he called and said, "Mom, it's just a formality. They won't approve the loan unless I have a co-signer. But I've got the job already. I promise." I signed. Of course I signed. That's what mothers do. You believe? Even when they stop asking if they should. When Harper was born, they lived on the other side of the city. Marley had long hours. Dean traveled. I offered to help just for a month. It turned into 4 years. Every morning, I packed snacks, changed diapers, read the same story 5 times in a row. Harper called me she before she said mama. They said I saved them. Said they couldn't have done it without me. But now they walk past me like I'm a fixture. Something they don't even glance at until it's blocking the hallway. Lenor arrived with a suitcase and a small dog in a pink carrier that barked like it had something to prove. No call ahead. No knock on the door. Just the sound of Dean's car pulling into the driveway and the trunk slamming shut. "We'll make it work," Marley said, as she held the door open wide like she was welcoming a delivery, not a permanent guest. Lenor stepped inside like she owned the air. She kissed the top of Dean's head, gave Marley a quick hug, and then looked around. "This is lovely. I can already tell I'll sleep like a baby here." Dean hoisted the suitcase and headed straight for the guest room. My guest room. I followed him as far as the hallway. The door was open. Inside, the linens I'd folded neatly weeks ago were now topped with a new stack of towels. My towels, the ones I had tucked away for company. A white label was stuck to the top of the pile, written in Marley's handwriting. For Lenor. My stomach tightened. I watched him smooth the comforter, my comforter, and place a water bottle on the nightstand like he was preparing a hotel suite. Lenor appeared behind me, dog carrier now empty. "Where should I keep her food?" "She has a special diet." Marley's voice floated in from the kitchen. "Just use the lower pantry drawer, the one under the spices." That was where I kept the candles Wallace bought for our last anniversary. I hadn't unpacked them yet. Dean passed by again, brushing past my shoulder. "This is best for everyone, Mom. Less stress. She just needs a place to land for a bit." I nodded, but I didn't agree. Later that night, I opened the fridge to grab milk for tea. The milk was gone. A glass jar of homemade bone broth sat in its place, marked with a piece of tape, "Do not touch for muffin." I opened my inbox after breakfast, just trying to forward a receipt to my accountant. The subject line caught my eye. Lenor's new address. At first, I assumed it was spam, but the sender name was familiar. Marley's sister Dana. I clicked. The attached form was crisp and filled out in blue digital ink. Lenor's full name, her Medicare ID, emergency contact information, mailing address, mine. My address. Not CO, not temporary, not even a note about shared residence, just my street, my house number, my zip code, like it had always belonged to her. There was more. A second attachment. Weekly grocery needs, Lenor, quinoa, herbal tinctures, filtered water, free-range eggs. A third muffins feeding schedule, 4 meals a day, no grains, no sharing bowls. A fourth, daycare drop-offs. Tentative, I didn't even know Muffin needed daycare. The fifth attachment stopped me cold. Electric and water transfer authorization form. Under requested new account holder, it said Lenor Becker. Under reason for transfer consolidation of household. I leaned back in the chair, blinking at the screen. They weren't settling in. They'd already moved her fully, officially on paper and in ink. I thought of Themament I'd handed Marley a housewarming gift last fall. A candle and a little wooden keychain carved into the shape of North Carolina. "We'll never forget how much you've helped us," she'd said. "This place is perfect for your peace. Perfect for my peace." Now even the space drawer didn't belong to me. I scrolled further down and saw a calendar invite. Lenor welcome brunch. Sunday 11 a.m. location my backyard. Guest list. 6 people I didn't know. I hadn't been copied. The only reason I saw the message at all was because Dana typed my address into the CC field by mistake. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I clicked print and slid the pages into a folder marked personal. I reached into the cabinet above the fridge and pulled down the envelope I hadn't touched since closing day. 2 weeks before I ever stepped foot in this house, before it even had a porch light or a garden bed. I'd met with Gloria Tate, my attorney, and put the entire property into a private trust. At the time, it felt like overkill, precaution. Gloria called it protection. I called it peace of mind. Page 5 of the document laid it out clearly. No non-owner may reside on the premises in whole or in part without the express written consent of the trustee. That trustee was me. I printed the deed that morning. The paper felt heavier than I remembered. I read every clause, every subheading just to be sure. Then I dialed Gloria's number and left a message. "Hi, it's Marble Knox. I'm ready to move forward with the provision we discussed, the occupancy clause. I'll need to file a formal notice of revocation." I hung up before I could second-guess myself. When I returned to the kitchen, Marley was standing on a step stool, a roller brush in her hand. The guest room wall was half covered in a pale beige, warmer than the paint I'd picked, with a slight yellow undertone. It clashed with the cool gray trim I had chosen specifically for that room. "I thought the space could use a little warmth," she said without looking at me. "Lenor's style is softer, more natural." Dean was in the backyard assembling a rattan patio. He said I didn't order. Muffin barked at him from the porch as he dropped a wrench into the grass. I opened the drawer next to the stove and pulled out a pen. The printout of the deed lay on the counter. I signed the bottom in steady strokes the way I used to sign school diplomas, firm, unshakable. Marley stepped down from the stool and stretched, leaving a thin smear of paint on the sleeve of my old gardening sweatshirt. She didn't notice. She didn't ask. I folded the signed deed into a fresh envelope and slid it beneath the ceramic bowl of lemons they'd brought over last week. Dean came back inside, wiping sweat from his brow just as the doorbell rang. Monday morning, Gloria filed the paperwork. Formal notice, no ambiguity. The trust clause invoked revocation of all unapproved residency effective immediately. She emailed me a copy with the subject line, "Executed." Tuesday, the locksmith arrived just before noon. I made him coffee while he worked. The old keys clinked on the counter like loose change. The new one's sleek brushed nickel fit into my palm like they belonged there. That afternoon, Dean asked why his key didn't work. I told him calmly, "Because you never asked if she could live here." He didn't answer, just stared at the door like it had betrayed him. Wednesday, I wrote the letter. 1 page, no emotion, no apology, just truth. I folded it in thirds and left it on the hallway table beside the little bowl where Marley kept her sunglasses. It read, "This house is not a plan B. It's not a favor. It's mine." Thursday was quiet. No one slammed doors. No one made coffee. No one offered unsolicited bone broth to my pantry shelves. Dean left early. Marley didn't speak. Lenor stayed in the guest room, blinds drawn. By Friday morning, 2 suitcases and a tote bag sat neatly beside the porch railing. Muffin's carrier was zipped and resting on top. I left a post-it on the door. "Please call a rideshare. This address is no longer yours to give." I didn't watch them leave. I heard the car pull into the driveway. Low voices, then silence. That evening, I opened all the windows. The wind carried out what was left of them. Their noise, their plans, their quiet, insistent entitlement. I lit a candle. Not one of Marley's eucalyptus blends, one of mine. Cinnamon and black coffee. I sat in my armchair by the window, the one Lenor had claimed on day 2. I read half a chapter of a book I'd been meaning to finish for months, and when the sun went down, I didn't lock the door right away. I just listened to the stillness. Saturday morning arrived with a knock at the door and Dean's voice calling my name. Dean let himself in like nothing had changed. No knock, no call, just the sound of the door swinging open and his voice echoing down the hallway. "Mom, this is dramatic." I didn't look up from the table where I sat, a cup of coffee growing cold beside me. The manila folder lay open, the signed trust document placed neatly on top. I slid it toward him. "This isn't a negotiation," I said. "It's legal. It's done." He stared at the paper like it had teeth. "We weren't trying to take anything from you." "We just thought you didn't," I interrupted. "You assumed. That's not the same." He didn't sit. He just stood there, shifting his weight between guilt and disbelief. "I never gave permission," I said calmly, clearly. "And you never asked." The door opened again. Marley walked in, holding a brown paper bag in each hand. "I brought Ty. I figured we could talk it through over dinner." She froze when she saw me, and Dean, and the document on the table. "No one's eating here tonight," I said. She blinked. "Are you serious?" I nodded once. Dean opened his mouth, then closed it. The bags rustled in Marley's hands, and I could hear the faint clink of takeout containers inside. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to make it clear this place belongs to me." Marley set the bags down on the kitchen counter a little too hard. "This is petty." "No," I replied, standing. "This is overdue." Neither of them moved as I gathered the document, folded it back into the folder, and slid it into the drawer beneath the coffee machine. I rinsed my cup. The sound of water was the only thing between us. Dean looked around the room like he didn't recognize it anymore. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I am done." They stood there like guests who'd overstayed, finally realizing the music had stopped. I walked past them and opened the back door. The air was cool and the sky was clear. I stepped outside and let the door close behind me. The guest room sat quiet again. Sunlight warmed the floorboards, uninterrupted by shadows or boxes. The windows were open just enough to let the breeze move the curtains. My mother's quilt, hand-stitched and faded with time, was folded neatly at the foot of the bed. It looked like it belonged there. I brewed coffee at 6. The French roast filled the kitchen the way it used to before the smell of kale chips and incense took over. I sat with the mug in both hands and listened to the silence, not emptiness, but calm. There was a difference. I had forgotten. At 8, I walked the loop around the lake. I waved at neighbors I barely knew yet. I nodded at the woman with the golden retriever and the man who jogged in mismatched socks. Nobody asked me who was living with me. No one needed to know. The hallway no longer echoed with unfamiliar footsteps. There were no passive-aggressive comments about towel placement or the thermostat. No more moving of my things. No subtle nudges to the margins of my own life. The spice drawer had been returned to its rightful order. The pantry was mine again, quietly, completely. I threw away the labeled jars, the expired bone broth, the turmeric chews. The bottom drawer, once meant for muffins, now held candles, linen napkins, and a stack of recipe cards in my handwriting. In the afternoons, I read on the porch. I answered phone calls if I felt like it. I didn't chase apologies that wouldn't come. Dean texted twice. Short messages. "You okay?" And then, "Let me know if you want to talk." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I was still learning what peace sounded like when it wasn't constantly interrupted. There was no drama, no scene, just a gentle clearing of space where something once was and should never have been. I lit one of my mother's old lavender candles and placed it on the windowsill of the guest room. The flame flickered steady and quiet. I stood in the doorway for a long time before closing it gently behind me. I wrote the letter on a Saturday morning. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache, just rests. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. I chose my words like I was folding something delicate. I addressed it to Harper, not Marley, not Dean, just my granddaughter, the only one who ever made the house feel full without crowding it. I included a photo I'd taken the day before. The lake shimmered under a pale blue sky, and in the corner of the frame, my porch chair sat empty, waiting. I slipped it into the envelope with the letter. "When you grow up," I wrote, "ask me what happened. I'll tell you with kindness, but not silence." No one else needed the story. Not now, not yet. But one day, she might want to understand what it means to keep a promise to yourself. What it costs to reclaim your name from the mouths of people who only say it when they need something. I sealed the envelope and tucked it into the wooden box where I keep family keepsakes. One drawer for photographs, one for letters, one for the truth that doesn't need witnesses. Later, I brewed another cup of coffee and carried it out to the porch. The mug warmed my hands as I sank into the chair. The breeze was steady. I could hear the soft tapping of tree branches against the eaves and the faint hum of a boat engine far across the lake. The sky stretched wide and quiet overhead. I watched a single bird glide along the water's edge, unhurried, unchased. My phone buzzed once on the table beside me. I didn't look. I didn't need to. Some stories demand to be told in real time. Others wait patiently for the person who's ready to hear them. I took a slow sip of coffee, the kind that stays warm because nothing else is pulling you away. Then I opened the book in my lap, found my place, and kept reading. Let us know in the comment where are you watching from. Please subscribe to the channel Her Side of the Story. Thanks for watching until here.